Maya had been standing outside the conference room for less than a minute when she heard her name spoken in a way that made her stomach tighten. Not called out, not announced, said, in that particular tone people use when they believe the person they are talking about is nowhere near. She did not push the door open. She did not spin around or raise her voice. She simply stood in the hallway of the Carver Group's 8th floor and listened, one hand resting lightly against the wall, as the sentence finished itself on the other side of the glass. Maya would have been the right choice, but she stepped back. So what are we going to do? Go backward? It was Neil's voice. Neil Hartley, Senior Director of Operations, a man who wore his authority like a coat that was one size too large for him, and had been doing so for 11 years. Maya recognized the sound of him the way you recognize the specific creak of a floorboard in a house you have lived in for too long. She let out a quiet breath. Then she straightened her jacket, picked up the folder she had set against her hip, and walked in. The room went still, not the dramatic kind of still, where everyone freezes and the moment announces itself, just the small, almost invisible kind, where a conversation ends a beat too early, and people find things to look at on the table in front of them. Neil looked up. He gave her the kind of smile that is designed to suggest nothing unusual has happened. "Maya," he said, "we were just about to start." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. She set her folder on the table. She did not smile back. "I know," she said. There were 5 other people in the room. Carol from finance, who was good at her job and careful with her loyalties. Owen, the new hire from the London office, who still had not learned to read a room. Priya, who had worked alongside Maya for 4 years, and who now looked at her with something that sat uncomfortably between sympathy and guilt, and at the far end, in the chair that had been, for the past 7 months, Maya's chair, Lena Carver. Lena was the owner's niece, though she had never made that the first thing she told you. She was 29, sharp, and possessed of a particular kind of confidence that reads as competence until you spend long enough around it to notice that it is something slightly different. She had arrived at the Carver Group 8 months ago with a junior title and a smile that she had clearly practiced. Within 6 weeks, she had been in every important meeting. Within 3 months, she had the office that used to belong to the previous creative director, who had retired. Within 7 months, she had the role that should have gone to Maya. The meeting began. Numbers were reviewed. Projections were discussed. Maya contributed where it was useful and said nothing where it was not. She was good at this. The discipline of the room, the clean lines of professional function. She had built her career on it, not on noise or on drama or on the particular performance of ambition that some people found necessary. She had built it on doing things extremely well and trusting that well-done work would eventually speak in a voice loud enough to be heard. She had believed this for 15 years. She was beginning to understand that she might have been wrong. After the meeting, Priya caught her in the hallway near the elevators. "Are you okay?" Priya asked, keeping her voice low. "I'm fine," Maya said. "What Neil said?" "I heard it," Maya said. "It doesn't matter." Priya looked at her for a moment. "It does matter, though. That's kind of the problem." Maya pressed the button for the elevator. It arrived with a soft chime. She stepped inside. "I'll see you tomorrow, Priya," she said. She did not say it unkindly. She just said it the way you say the one thing you are sure of, and the doors closed between them. The truth was that Maya had known this was coming for longer than she had admitted to herself. The signs had been there the way small things always are. Not dramatic, not obvious, just present and patient, waiting for you to stop looking past them. She had started at the Carver Group as an account coordinator, fresh out of university, 22 years old and carrying the particular kind of hunger that comes from having grown up watching your parents work hard for things that always seemed slightly out of reach. Her mother had cleaned offices. Her father had driven delivery trucks. Neither of them had ever complained about this, but Maya had noticed, early on, the way the world was arranged, who sat at tables, and who moved around them refilling water. And she had decided, with a quietness that was not coldness, but was very much resolve, that she would sit at the table. She had spent the next 15 years doing exactly that. She had learned the business from the inside out. She had stayed late, not to be seen staying late, but because there was always something worth understanding, if you looked at it long enough. She had asked questions that were good questions. She had built relationships that were real ones, not the kind you manufacture at industry events with business cards and rehearsed anecdotes. but the kind that form when you actually know what someone is working on and why it matters. By the time she was 32, she was managing 3 accounts and a team of 6. By 35, she was the person the company's largest clients asked for by name. By 37, she was in every strategic conversation the Carver Group had, even the ones she was not officially invited to, because people kept finding ways to get her in the room. The creative director position had been the natural next step. Everyone in the company knew it. Even Neil, despite everything, knew it. She had been doing the job already in every meaningful sense, guiding creative decisions, mentoring the junior team, shaping the direction of the agency's most important campaigns, for nearly 2 years. And then Lena had arrived. Maya remembered the day clearly. It had been a Tuesday in October, cooler than expected, the kind of morning where the light arrives thin and clear, and you feel more awake than usual. She had been in her office reviewing copy for the Harriman account, when Neil knocked and came in with a woman she had never seen. "This is Lena," Neil had said. "She's joining us in a business development capacity. I thought she should meet some of the senior team." Lena had extended her hand and given Maya a smile that was warm and direct. "I've heard so much about you," she said. "You're the one everyone speaks highly of around here." Maya had shaken her hand. She had smiled back. She had said something polite and welcome. She had not known then, or perhaps she had known but not yet allowed herself to know, which is a different thing, and a much more human one. Within 3 weeks of Lena's arrival, something shifted in the way the office moved around her. Meetings that had not previously included her began to. Conversations that took place in Neil's office with the door closed, which in 15 years had never included Lena, because Lena had not existed, now apparently did. Small things, but real ones. Maya watched without comment. She told herself this was fine. New people arrived in offices all the time and created disturbance in the normal currents. It settled. It always settled. But this did not settle. In February, 4 months after Lena's arrival, Neil called Maya into his office and told her that the company was restructuring the creative director role. "We're expanding its scope," he said. "We want someone who can bridge the creative and business development sides. More integrated, more forward-looking." Maya had listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "When will you announce the decision?" Neil looked slightly caught. "It's still being discussed at board level." She looked at him for a moment. "Okay," she said, and stood up and left. She spent that evening at the kitchen table of her apartment with a cup of tea she forgot to drink, and she thought about what she was willing to do. She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about all difficult things, without drama, without pretending the options were simpler than they were, without lying to herself about what she wanted. She wanted the role. She had earned the role. She was the right person for the role, and she was aware, without arrogance, that this was a fact and not an opinion. She also knew, had known for some weeks, in the particular way that a person who pays attention always knows things before they are confirmed, that the role was going to Lena. And she knew something else, something that complicated the whole picture in a way she had not fully expected. Lena was actually good. She was not the substance Maya was, not yet, not close, but she had real potential, the kind that you cannot manufacture, the kind that either exists in someone or does not. She was sharp. She cared. Underneath the advantage of her name and her connection to the family, there was something genuine. Maya sat with all of this for a long time. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She picked up her phone and called Neil. "I want to support Lena's transition," she said. "If she's going to take the creative director role, I want to make sure she has what she needs to do it well. I'll step back from the internal process, and I will brief her personally on everything she needs to know." There was a long pause on the other end. "Maya," Neil said slowly, "you don't have to do that." "I know," she said. "I want to." She had gone to bed that night and slept better than she had in weeks, which surprised her. She had expected the grief of it to keep her awake. Instead, she felt something quieter. Not peace exactly, but the particular kind of calm that comes from making a decision that is aligned with who you actually are, even when who you are asks something difficult of you. The next morning she walked into Lena's office, which was not yet Lena's office because the announcement had not yet been made, but which both of them somehow already understood to be Lena's office, and she sat down and said, I'd like to help you get ready." Lena had looked at her with an expression that was hard to read. Something moved across it. Surprise, maybe, or something more complicated. "I know what everyone is expecting," Maya said, before Lena could say anything. "I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the company doing well and the creative work being strong. If you're going to lead that, you should understand where everything stands." "Why are you doing this?" Lena asked. Maya thought about the question. It deserved a real answer. "Because it's the right thing," she said. "And because I believe that the work matters more than the title." She was not sure, even as she said it, whether she fully meant the second part, but she meant the first part completely. And so she had spent the next 3 weeks transferring everything she knew. Every client relationship, every creative brief, every ongoing project, every piece of institutional history that existed only in her head because she had been carrying it for so long that she had stopped thinking of it as unusual to carry. She gave Lena all of it. She was thorough, and she was honest, and she was professional. And Lena had received all of it, with a gratitude that seemed real. She had said thank you many times. She had told Maya that she would not forget this. She had said, with what had looked very much like sincerity, that she intended to honor what Maya had built. The announcement came on a Thursday morning in March. Lena Carver, creative director. A company-wide email, clean and brief. There was a small gathering in the afternoon, drinks in the large conference room, people moving in the easy way of office social events where the mood is more relief than celebration. Maya attended. She smiled. She shook Lena's hand. She said, "You're going to do a great job." And then she had gone home and sat in her quiet apartment and allowed herself, finally, to feel the weight of what she had done. It had not broken her. She had not expected it to. She was not the kind of person things broke easily, but it was heavy, and she let herself feel the heaviness of it, and she thought, "I made this choice. I made it with open eyes, and I can live with it." What she had not predicted, what she had perhaps, in her most honest self, been trying not to predict, was what happened next. In the weeks following the announcement, she waited for the thing she had told herself she was not expecting. Some acknowledgement, some act of professional generosity from Lena, some gesture that said, "I know what was given to me and I honor it." It did not come. What came instead was something smaller and harder to name. A shift in the way Lena moved through the office. A change in how she spoke about the accounts, the history, the work, gradually, almost imperceptibly, scrubbing Maya's fingerprints from things Maya had built. Not maliciously, or perhaps not consciously, but it happened nonetheless. By April, stories about the agency's strongest campaigns were being told in ways that credited Lena's direction. By May, new clients being onboarded were introduced to the creative legacy of the company, through a version that began roughly 8 months ago. By June, 2 of Maya's longest-standing client contacts had mentioned, in passing, that they had heard Lena had really turned the creative department around. Turned it around, as if it had been struggling, as if there had been nothing there worth turning toward. Maya heard these things. She absorbed them. She did not say anything to anyone, partly because she did not know what to say, and partly because she understood that the act of saying it would define her in a way she did not want to be defined, as the person who could not let go, who needed credit, who had done something generous, and then stood over it demanding recognition. She refused to be that person. But refusing to be a thing and being untouched by a thing are not the same. She was not untouched. She felt it in small, regular ways, a tightening in the chest during certain meetings, a brief and quickly managed reaction when Lena spoke with easy authority about things Maya had spent years learning. A quiet and persistent sense that the room she was standing in had been subtly rearranged around her while she was not looking. She kept doing her job, she kept doing it well, but something had changed, and she felt that change, the way you feel. A change in the weather before the weather arrives, in the body first, before the mind has named it. She did not know yet what she was going to do about it. She did not know yet that there was someone else in the building who had been watching all of this, and forming his own understanding of it, and waiting for the right moment to say something. She did not know yet that the right moment was closer than she thought. The name of the person watching was Damon Cole. He was the company's head of client services, had been for 6 years, and was the kind of person who filled rooms without filling rooms. Meaning he had a quality of presence that was not about volume or performance but about attention. He noticed things. He remembered things. He had been in the industry for 14 years and had developed, over that time, a very specific skill that he rarely talked about, the ability to see clearly through the social surfaces that people in professional environments worked very hard to maintain. He had watched Lena's rise with the careful interest of someone who is trying to decide how he feels about something, and he had watched Maya throughout all of it, and he had come to a conclusion. But that is the next part of the story. What matters now is this. Maya sat at her desk on a Tuesday in late June, 15 years of work surrounding her in the form of a clean, organized office with good light, and she thought about what she was willing to do next. She was 37 years old. She was skilled. She was not defeated. But she was tired of standing in a room that kept forgetting she had helped build it. And something, very quietly, was about to change. Damon Cole did not consider himself an observant person in the romantic sense of the word, meaning he did not think of his ability to notice things as a gift or a talent. He thought of it the way a person who grew up in a noisy house thinks of the ability to read in the middle of noise. It was something he had developed because the alternative was being caught off guard, and he had learned early that being caught off guard cost you. He had grown up in a household where the rules changed without announcement, and the emotional weather shifted faster than any child should have been expected to track. His father, a contractor, was a man who said what he meant when he was calm, and meant much more than he said when he was not. His mother was the kind of steady that reveals itself most clearly in difficult moments, which is not the most comfortable kind of steady to live with, but is the most reliable. Between the two of them, Damon had become a person who read rooms the way other people read books, quickly, with attention to what was on the page and what was not. He had carried this into every professional space he had ever occupied. He had been watching the situation at the Carver Group for months. Not because it directly involved him. It did not, entirely. But because he had spent enough time around companies to know that the stories people told about how things happened were almost never the whole story. And the Carver Group's official story about the transition of creative leadership had always struck him as a summary with several important pages left out. It had begun for him with something small, a comment, in March, at the drinks gathering following Lena's announcement. He had been standing near the window with a glass of sparkling water. He rarely drank at work events, a habit he had formed early and kept because he liked being the clearest person in the room, when he overheard Owen, the new hire from the London office, ask Priya whether it had been a competitive process. "I mean, was it ever really open?" Priya had said, and then caught herself, and then said something smoothing and neutral, and moved away from the conversation. That was the first thing. The second thing was Maya herself, and the particular quality of her silence. Damon had worked alongside Maya for 3 years, not closely. Their departments intersected but did not overlap, but enough to have formed a clear sense of who she was. She was precise. She was unshowy. She had a way of contributing to conversations that was quietly decisive, meaning she did not say many things, but the things she said tended to be the ones that clarified what had been blurry. He had respected this about her without ever having told her so, which was perhaps a failure on his part. But professional environments had their own conventions, and he had followed them. What he noticed in the weeks following the announcement was that Maya continued to be all of those things, precise, unshowy, clear, but that she was doing all of it with a quality of stillness that was different from her usual stillness. Her usual stillness was the kind that comes from being settled. This new stillness was the kind that comes from being very careful. There is a difference, and he saw it. He began to pay closer attention. Through April, he noticed the way Lena spoke about the accounts. He had been in enough meetings by then to have a baseline, to know roughly which campaigns had been driven by which thinking, which client relationships carried Maya's fingerprints, which creative directions had their origin in decisions made before Lena arrived. He was not a creative person himself, but he understood the architecture of creative work from the outside, the way a person who cannot play music can still hear when a song is being credited to the wrong composer. He noticed that the credits were being quietly reassigned. He noticed that no one said anything about it. He was not sure what to make of this. The absence of protest could mean many things. People could be diplomatic. People could have decided it was not their fight. People could simply not be paying as close attention as he was. Or Maya could have chosen not to contest it, which would be a different and more interesting thing. In May, he had a meeting with a client named Jeff Harrison, who ran a mid-sized retail chain and had been working with the Carver Group for 6 years. Jeff was the kind of client who had an opinion about everything and shared it without being asked, which Damon had learned to work with and even, occasionally, to value. "You've got a good agency," Jeff said, near the end of the meeting, in the particular tone of someone who was about to qualify a compliment. "Whoever built that brand framework for us back in 22. That was smart work. The new director is charming, but I haven't seen thinking like that from her yet." Damon made a note of this and kept his expression neutral. "We're proud of the work we've done for you," he said. "Who was the person on that?" Jeff pressed. "The 22 campaign. I want to send a note." "I'll look into it and get back to you," Damon said. He knew who it was. He had already known. He looked it up anyway, to confirm, and found Maya's name on the brief, from every angle he checked it from. He did not immediately do anything with this. He turned it over in his mind for several days. He thought about whether it was his business, and decided it probably was not, technically, and then thought about whether that was a sufficient reason to leave it alone, and decided that it probably was not either. Because here was the thing about Damon Cole. He had built his career on the belief that professional environments functioned better when they were honest, and that the politeness of silence, while comfortable, had a long and well-documented history of producing outcomes that were neither fair nor sustainable. He had seen it happen in other places. He had watched talented people get quietly sidelined, while less talented people moved forward, and he had watched the companies that allowed this become, gradually, worse at what they did. It was not always dramatic. It did not announce itself. It was just a slow accumulation of misattributions until the thing that made the company worth anything had been diluted past the point of recognition. He did not want to watch it happen here, but he also understood that he needed to be careful about how he proceeded. He was not Maya's advocate. She had not asked him to be. He was not her ally in any formal sense, and the last thing he wanted to do was approach this in a way that made him look like someone inserting himself into a situation for reasons that had nothing to do with the company's well-being. So he waited, and he continued to watch. The situation that finally moved him to act was not dramatic. It was, like most of the things that had preceded it, small. It happened on a Wednesday morning in late June. He had come in early. He often came in early, finding the hour before the office filled to be the most useful one, and was making coffee in the small kitchen on the 8th floor when Maya walked in. She did not see him immediately. She was carrying a folder, and had the particular look of someone who has been thinking continuously since the moment they woke up, which Damon recognized because he often had that look himself. When she did see him, her expression reorganized itself in the smooth, practiced way of a person who has been managing their expressions in professional spaces for a long time. She gave him a brief, polite smile. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he said. He poured his coffee. She moved to the cabinet for a mug. There was a brief and not uncomfortable silence, and then he said, without having planned to, "You look like you've been thinking about something difficult." She looked at him with an expression that was not unfriendly but was clearly assessing, trying to determine whether this was a real question or the kind of performative observation that people make in kitchens before their second cup of coffee. "Most things worth thinking about are difficult," she said. He nodded. "Fair enough." She poured her tea. He drank his coffee. She was about to leave when he said, "Can I ask you something?" She stopped, turned back. "Sure." "The Harrison brand framework, the one from 22. Something moved across her face. Just briefly. "What about it?" "That was you, wasn't it?" She held his gaze for a moment. "It was a team effort," she said. "It was the answer you gave when you had learned not to claim things." He recognized it. "Jeff Harrison asked about it," Damon said. "He wanted to send a note to whoever let it. I told him I'd find out." He paused. "I already knew, but I wanted to confirm it." She was quiet for a moment. "He doesn't need to send a note," she said. "He disagrees," Damon said. "And honestly, so do I." She looked at him with the careful steadiness of a person trying to figure out what something means. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. It was a direct question, and it deserved a direct answer. "Because I've been watching what's been happening for a few months," he said, choosing his words with the precision he used when a situation required honesty rather than comfort. "And I think you've been doing something that most people would not have done." and I think it's been costing you in ways that nobody is talking about." The silence that followed was a real one, not awkward, but full. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, "It was the right thing to do." "I believe you," he said. "That doesn't mean it was the smart thing to do. Sometimes the right thing and the smart thing are different." "Yes," he said. "And sometimes the person who pays the price for that difference deserves to have someone notice." She did not say anything to that, but something in her expression shifted, not cracked, not opened dramatically, just shifted, the way a door does when the latch releases, even if the door itself has not moved yet. She picked up her tea. "I appreciate that," she said, and her voice was steady, but carried something in it that was not quite as managed as the rest of her. She left the kitchen. Damon stood there for a moment, his coffee in his hand, thinking. He had done what he had set out not to do, inserted himself. But standing there now, he did not feel that he had made a mistake. He felt, in fact, quite certain that he had not. What he did not yet know was how deeply that kitchen conversation would sit in both of them, how it would turn something over in Maya that had not been turned in a long time, how it would confirm something in himself that he had been trying to name for several months. He also did not know, because it had not happened yet, that Lena had seen them through the kitchen's small window as she walked past, that she had stopped for just a moment, looking in at the two of them, before continuing down the hall. Lena had very good instincts. It was, in fact, one of her real qualities. And her instincts told her, watching Maya and Damon through that window, that something had shifted. She did not know what. She did not know how much. But she knew the look of a conversation that carries weight, and what she had seen through that window had the particular gravity of two people saying something they had not said to each other before. She filed this away. She was, like Damon in certain ways, a person who noticed things. The difference was what each of them intended to do about what they noticed. Damon intended to be honest. Lena intended to be careful. And Maya was still in the process of deciding what she intended. Standing in the elevator on her way back to her floor, tea warm in her hands, she thought about what Damon had said. Sometimes the person who pays the price deserves to have someone notice. She thought about how long it had been since someone had noticed. She thought about what it meant that it was Damon who had said it. She thought about a great many things in the 45 seconds it took the elevator to rise from the 8th floor to the 11th, and by the time the doors opened and she stepped out into the bright, open space of her department, she had not resolved any of them. But something was moving in her. Something that had been still for a long time. She walked to her desk. She set down her tea. She opened her folder. She worked. But underneath the work, underneath the clean precision of everything she did, something was different now. She could feel it. She just did not know yet what it was going to become. Outside the window, the city moved in its ordinary morning way. People, traffic, light, completely unaware that in a building on the corner of Carver Street, something had been set in motion that would not be reversed. There is a particular kind of woman who has learned, over years and through specific experience, to take up less space than she deserves. She does not do this from weakness. She does it from a kind of precision. She has noticed that taking up her full space tends to make certain rooms uncomfortable, and she has decided, usually without quite naming the decision, that her own comfort matters less than the room's comfort. She is often the most capable person in the space. She is frequently the one doing the most work, and she has become so practiced at doing it quietly that people have begun to assume the quiet is natural, that she simply prefers the edges, that the invisibility is a choice, rather than a negotiation she was never formally invited to. Maya Ellis was that kind of woman, and she was only beginning to understand it. The morning after the kitchen conversation with Damon, she sat in her office with the door half open. She always kept it half open, a habit she had formed early as a signal that she was available, which had the unintended secondary effect of meaning she was never fully closed off, never fully in a space that was only hers. And she reviewed the week's creative briefs with a thoroughness that her team had long since stopped commenting on, because it was simply who she was. But her mind was not entirely on the briefs. It was on the way Damon had looked at her when he said sometimes the person who pays the price deserves to have someone notice. He had not said it with pity. That was the thing she kept returning to. Pity she knew how to dismiss. She had developed over the years an efficient and nearly automatic way of receiving pity, and setting it aside before it could stick. She did not want anyone's sadness on her behalf. She did not want to be the subject of anyone's quiet outrage. But what Damon had offered was not pity. It was something that sat much closer to recognition, the kind of acknowledgement that comes from someone who has looked at a situation honestly and named what they saw. He had not tried to comfort her or redirect her. He had just said, "I see what happened. I see what it cost. Someone should say that." She had not expected to be moved by it. She was not generally moved easily. She was moved by it. She spent most of that morning turning it over, examining it with the same careful attention she gave to everything, trying to understand what it told her. About Damon. About herself. About the situation she had been navigating for the past several months, with a discipline that had served her but had also, she was beginning to understand, cost her something she had not put a name to yet. What it had cost her was the habit of honesty about how she felt. She was honest, in professional contexts. Rigorously so. She was honest in her assessments, honest in her feedback, honest with clients and colleagues in the ways that mattered most to the quality of the work, but about her own experience of things, about what she wanted, what she felt, what she had given up, and whether it had been the right thing. She had been something other than honest. She had been managed, controlled, careful in the way that a person is careful when they believe that being uncareful would be misread or used against them. She had been protecting herself. She understood that now. She just had not been protecting herself from the right things. She had been so focused on not appearing to be the woman who was bitter about being passed over that she had never allowed herself to honestly examine whether she had any right to be something. Not bitter. That was not the right word, and she was precise about words. Disappointed, undervalued, quietly erased. Those were the right words. She held them in her mind for a moment, held them the way you hold something heavy to test whether you can carry the weight of it, and found that she could. They did not break her. They simply sat there, accurate and uncomfortable, waiting to be dealt with honestly. She was still sitting with this when Lena appeared in the doorway. Lena knocked on the open door, a courtesy Maya had always appreciated, the small act of asking permission to enter even when the door was technically open, and smiled. "Do you have 5 minutes?" she asked. "Of course," Maya said. Lena came in and sat in the chair across from the desk. She was wearing a green dress that suited her, and carrying one of the slim notebooks she had taken to using since she stepped into the director role. She looked, as she almost always did, thoroughly composed. "I wanted to talk about the Ridley account," she said. "We're in the final prep stages for the Q3 presentation, and I've been reviewing the original brand architecture." She paused. "There are elements in there that I want to carry forward, but I'm not entirely clear on the thinking behind some of the structural choices. I wondered if you could walk me through them." Maya looked at her. This was the thing about Lena that made everything complicated. She was not entirely wrong in what she did. She came to Maya when she needed knowledge. She asked good questions. She was trying to do the job well. These were all true things, and Maya acknowledged them honestly. But she also noticed, as she always noticed, that Lena did not say, "the structure that you built, or your original architecture, or the thinking you developed." She said the structural choices, as if they were simply elements of the account rather than work that a specific person had done. It was a small thing. It was always a small thing. Small things have a way of accumulating. "Sure," Maya said. "I'll walk you through it." She spent 20 minutes explaining the logic of the Ridley brand framework, the decisions made 3 years ago, the client conversations that had shaped them, the particular problem the architecture had been designed to solve. She explained it with the care she always brought to this kind of knowledge transfer. She held nothing back. Lena listened carefully, took notes, asked sharp questions. By the end of the conversation, she clearly had a much better grasp of the material, and she said so, genuinely. "This is really helpful," she said. "You have a way of explaining things that makes the reasoning visible. I always come away from conversations with you understanding more than I expected to." Maya looked at her. "I'm glad," she said. There was a brief pause. Then Lena said something that she had perhaps not intended to say, or perhaps had been thinking about since the morning before. "I saw you talking to Damon yesterday," she said, "in the kitchen." Her tone was casual. Her eyes were not quite as casual. "We ran into each other," Maya said. "He's been asking a lot of questions about the accounts lately," Lena said. "He's very thorough." He is, Maya agreed. Another brief pause. He's good at his job, Lena said. I just think it's important that everyone is working from the same information. Maya looked at her steadily. I think that's important too, she said. There was a moment between them. Not hostile, not warm. Just the particular quality of two people who understand each other's subtext and have decided, by mutual tacit agreement, to leave it in the subtext rather than the text. Lena stood. She smiled. She thanked Maya again for the time. She left. Maya sat in the silence that followed and thought about that last exchange for a long time. It is important that everyone is working from the same information. It was a reasonable sentence. It was also a warning. She had heard both at the same time, which was a particular kind of clarity that she did not enjoy but could not dismiss. Lena was aware of Damon. Lena was aware that Damon had been paying attention. And Lena, who had very good instincts, was beginning to understand that Damon's attention was not neutral. This complicated things. Not because Maya feared Lena. She did not. But because she understood, very clearly, that a situation she had been managing alone and quietly was no longer entirely alone or entirely quiet. Another person was now involved, and that person's involvement, however well-intentioned, had the potential to create consequences she had not planned for and could not fully control. She thought about whether she minded this. She found, to her moderate surprise, that she did not. She was tired of being the only one who carried the weight of what she knew. She was tired of moving through the office with this private understanding that she kept so carefully managed that nobody could see it unless they were paying the kind of attention Damon apparently had been paying. She was tired, in a very simple and undramatic way, of doing everything by herself. She did not tell herself this meant anything beyond what it was. She was not a person given to building narratives around small developments, but she acknowledged the fact of it, that someone had seen her, and that being seen, after so long of not being seen, had done something to her equilibrium that she was going to have to account for. She went home that evening by a different route than usual. Not for any reason. She had not decided to walk a different way. She simply found herself going somewhere different and followed it. She walked past a small park she had not been to in years, where a few children were still out playing in the summer evening light, and she stood at the iron gate for a moment and watched them and thought about what it would mean to stop being so careful. What it would mean to simply decide that the truth was hers to tell, and to tell it. Not to anyone who would use it, not as an act of self-promotion or revenge, but simply to stop pretending that what had happened was entirely fine, and to stop performing a contentment she did not feel around people who perhaps deserved to know what she actually thought. She stood there at the park gate for 3 or 4 minutes. The evening light was the specific gold of late June, falling through the trees and across the grass in the way that light only falls in that particular hour. One of the children, a small girl in red, no more than 6 or 7, was running in circles for no reason she could determine, just running, arms out, her face turned up to the light. Maya watched her for a moment. Then she smiled, not for anyone, just to herself, and walked on. She did not know yet what she was going to do, but she knew something had loosened in her. Something she had held tightly for a long time had been, without announcement, released. She thought about Damon again, about the quality of his directness, about the fact that he had said what he said not because it was comfortable to say it, but because it was true. She thought about what it meant to be seen by someone who was looking clearly. She had spent 15 years building her skill and her reputation in a company that had, in the end, given the thing she earned to someone else. She had handled that with grace. She had been, by any measure, extraordinary in how she had handled it. But grace is not the same as approval, and she had perhaps, in her determination to be graceful, allowed herself to be mistaken for someone who was not affected, for someone who was fine with it. She was not fine with it. She had been fine about it, which was different. And the difference, she was beginning to understand, was going to start mattering. Meanwhile, across the city, in a restaurant on the east side where he ate dinner alone 2 or 3 times a week because he found it useful to think in places that were not his apartment, Damon Cole sat with a small glass of red wine and thought about Maya Ellis. He thought about the way she had looked in the kitchen, the careful composure that was not quite as composed as it usually was, the moment, just for a second, when something real had shown through the management. He thought about what he knew and what he did not know. He knew that she had stepped back. He knew that what she had built was being absorbed without acknowledgement. He knew that she was the most capable person in the creative department, and that the creative department did not currently reflect that. What he did not know was what she was going to do about any of it. What he did not know was whether she was going to do anything at all. And he found, sitting there with his wine and the ordinary noise of the restaurant, that he cared about the answer to this question more than a professional interest in the situation fully explained. He was honest with himself about this. He was almost always honest with himself, which was not always comfortable but was, he had found, the most efficient way to live. He cared because he respected her. He had respected her for a long time. And he thought, drinking his wine and watching the room around him move in its familiar evening patterns, that respect, real respect, the kind that comes from actually seeing someone clearly, was a much rarer thing than people acknowledged. He thought that Maya Ellis deserved to be seen clearly. He thought that he would like to be the person who saw her that way. He set down his glass. Outside the restaurant, the city continued in its ordinary noise. Traffic, voices, the sound of a city doing what cities do, holding all of its contradictions, and small moments, and large stories, in one continuous, indifferent sound. Inside the Carver Group, on the 8th floor, the lights were still on in 2 offices. One was Lena's, the other was Maya's. Both of them working, both of them thinking. The same building, the same floor, the same company. And an understanding growing between them, slowly, quietly, with the particular patience of things that are getting ready to matter, that the quiet arrangement they had been living in was not going to hold. Not for much longer. Something was going to have to give. And when it did, the person who had the clearest sense of what was real was going to be the one standing on the right side of it. Maya turned off her light at 9:30. Lena's light stayed on until 11. Neither of them knew this about the other. But Damon, walking past the building on his way home, looked up and noticed both lights and thought, without quite knowing why, it is almost time. There are moments in a person's professional life that seem, from the outside, like small events. A conversation in a hallway, a meeting that runs longer than expected, an email that arrives on a Thursday afternoon, but that are, in fact, turning points. The kind of moments that, looked back on from a later distance, were clearly where everything changed. You cannot always feel them as they happen. Sometimes you are too close to the event to understand its shape. Sometimes the significance only becomes clear when you can see what came before and what came after, and understand that this was the hinge between them. Maya felt hers coming before it arrived. She felt it in the way she felt weather, not as a precise prediction, but as a change in something fundamental, a shift in the quality of the air, a sense that the current that had been carrying her in one direction was slowing, and that what lay ahead was not more of the same. It was the first week of July. The Carver Group was in one of those periods that agencies go through twice a year, the pre-summer sprint, where everything that had been accumulating since January suddenly reached its deadline simultaneously, and the office took on the particular pressured energy of people doing too many things at once. There were client presentations scheduled for every day of the week. There were campaigns going live that had been in development for months. There were internal reviews, budget conversations, team meetings that had been pushed back twice already and could no longer be deferred. Maya moved through all of it with her usual efficiency. She was the kind of person who performed better under pressure rather than worse, not because she was impervious to it, but because pressure clarified her. It stripped away the peripheral and left only what mattered, and she was good at working with what mattered. She was in back-to-back meetings from 8 in the morning until almost 2 in the afternoon on Tuesday. The last of them was a review of the Meridian account, which was the agency's largest and most complicated client relationship, a retail brand with a global presence, and the particular kind of demanding standards that come from having very specific ideas about what good looks like. Maya had managed Meridian for 4 years. She knew the account better than anyone. She had built the relationship with their marketing director, a sharp and occasionally difficult woman named Frances, who respected competence above all things, and had, over the years, come to rely on Maya in the particular way that clients rely on people who they trust, to understand their business as deeply as they understand their own. Lena was now the lead on Meridian. This was a transition that had been managed, from Lena's side, with the kind of confidence that is hard to argue with in the moment. She had come into the relationship with energy and ideas, and she had been, to her credit, well prepared. Maya had prepared her. She had spent hours briefing Lena on the history of the account, the client's preferences, the previous campaigns, the conversations that had shaped the current direction. She had done this, as she did everything, with complete professionalism. What she had not been able to transfer, because it could not be transferred, was the 4 years of relationship, the particular shorthand that develops between a client and an account person over time, the trust, which is not a thing you can hand to someone else regardless of how thorough your briefing is. Frances had not been difficult about the transition. She was professional, but she had said to Maya, in a phone call 2 weeks after the announcement, something that Maya had not forgotten. "I want to understand something," Frances had said, "and I'm asking you directly, because you are someone I know tells me the truth." "I'll tell you the truth," Maya said. "Was this your choice, stepping back from Meridian?" There was a silence. "I supported the transition," Maya said carefully. Another silence, from Frances's end. Then, "That's not what I asked." Maya had not answered that question then. She had redirected the conversation, professionally, to the account, and Frances, who understood the difference between evasion and professional discretion, had let her. But the question had stayed. It was still with her on Tuesday afternoon, as she came out of the Meridian Review and walked toward her office. The meeting had gone well. Lena had been prepared. The client had been pleased. The presentation had landed. There was nothing to fault. And yet Maya had sat through the entire thing aware, at every moment, of the particular dissonance of being the person in the room who knew the most, and being asked to play a supporting role. She had answered when addressed. She had contributed where it was useful. She had been, in every professional sense, appropriate. She was exhausted by how much it cost to be appropriate. She was thinking about this, or rather, she had stopped thinking about it in the managed way, and had simply let herself feel the full weight of it, which was different, and considerably less comfortable. When she turned the corner toward her office, and found Damon Cole, leaning against the wall beside her door. He was not waiting in an obvious way. He was looking at something on his phone, and he might have been there for any reason. But when he looked up and saw her, he put his phone away and said, "Do you have a few minutes?" She looked at him. She thought about whether she had the energy for a conversation. She found, which surprised her, that she did. "Come in," she said, and opened her door. He sat in the chair across from her desk, the same one Lena had sat in earlier that week, and she sat across from him, and for a moment neither of them said anything, which was the kind of silence that only happens between people who are comfortable enough with each other to not immediately fill it. "How was the Meridian meeting?" he asked. "It went well," she said. He looked at her. "It went well professionally," she said. "Lena was good. The client was pleased." "But?" he said. She looked at him for a moment. "How often do you do that?" "Do what?" "Hear the thing that isn't said." He considered this. "Fairly often. It's usually what matters most." She nodded slowly. Then she said, "It's strange to watch someone do the job you built. Even when they're doing it well. There's a kind of wrongness to it that I haven't found a way to fully explain, and I've been trying to explain it to myself for several months." He listened to this without reacting in the way people usually react to things like this, without jumping to reassurance or advice, or the particular awkward attempt to solve a feeling by talking it out of existence. He just listened, and let it be what it was. "That makes sense," he said. "Does it?" "Yes. You're not watching someone do your job. You're watching someone do a version of your job that can only exist because you prepared the ground for it, and the ground isn't visible. That's the wrongness. The work that made everything else possible is invisible." She sat back slightly. "You're very specific about this." "I've had some time to think about it," he said. "Why?" He held her gaze. "Because I think what happened here matters. And because I think you have been very careful not to say that it matters, and I think that carefulness has been useful in some ways and very costly in others." She was quiet for a moment. Outside her half-open door, the office moved in its usual afternoon way. Voices, footsteps, the sound of keyboards and phones, the familiar background noise of a working day. "What do you want from this conversation, Damon?" she asked. Not unkindly, just directly. "Honestly," he said, I want to understand what you're going to do. About what? About any of it, about being here, about what's happened, about where this goes. He paused. Because I think you're someone who has been so good at managing your own responses that you have not allowed yourself to actually respond. And I think that has costs. She looked at him for a long moment. You're not wrong, she said. It was the most honest thing she had said to anyone in the building in months. He nodded. I don't know what I'm going to do, she said. I genuinely don't. I have been trying to figure that out, and I keep coming back to the same problem, which is that everything I know how to do, all the ways I know how to respond to things, require me to be doing something. And what happened here was something I chose. I stepped back. I gave something away, and you can't fight against the consequences of your own choices by pretending you didn't make them. No, he agreed, but you can decide what the next choice is. She looked at him. The choice you made was generous, he said. I think it was probably right, in the sense that your reasons for making it were good ones, but generosity doesn't obligate you to invisibility, and I think you've interpreted stepping back as stepping out, and those are not the same thing. She was quiet for long enough that he added, more gently, what do you actually want, Maya? Not what makes sense, not what's professional. What do you want? No one had asked her that question, not in relation to any of this, not once. The honest answer arrived before she could manage it. She wanted to be seen. She wanted the work to be acknowledged. She wanted someone to say, clearly and in the right context, what had happened, and who had done it, and what it had cost. She wanted the record to be accurate. And underneath all of that, more quietly and more powerfully than she knew how to say out loud, she wanted to stop doing this alone. She did not say all of this to Damon. She was not ready to say all of it. But something in her expression, in the particular quality of her stillness in that moment, must have communicated something, because he looked at her with a directness that was not intrusive, but was completely unclouded. You don't have to figure out the whole thing right now, he said, but I think you know more than you're letting yourself know, and I think when you're ready to say it, you should say it. To who? She asked. He held her gaze. Start with me, he said, and go from there. She looked at him for a long moment. There was something happening in that room that neither of them had named, and perhaps, at this stage, did not need to name. Something that existed below the professional conversation, and was real, despite not being spoken. She felt it, and she thought, from the particular way he held her gaze without looking away, that he felt it too. She was not going to do anything about it today. She was not a person who moved quickly on things that mattered, and this was one of those things. But she was going to think about it. She was going to think about a great many things. Okay, she said. It was a small word. It carried a great deal. He stood. He straightened his jacket. He gave her a brief, real smile. Not the professional kind, the kind that lives above the eyes rather than below them. Good meeting, Maya, he said. She almost laughed. Good meeting, she said. He left. She sat in her office for several minutes after he left, not reviewing anything, not preparing for the next thing, just sitting. The afternoon light was coming through her window at an angle. The city was doing its city things outside. The office was continuing around her in its ordinary way. But she was thinking about what it would mean to stop being so careful, to decide that the truth was real, and that it belonged to her, and that she was allowed to say it. Not as a wound, not as an accusation, just as something accurate. She opened her laptop. She looked at the document she had been working on, a creative brief for a new pitch that was not due for 3 weeks, but that she had been developing ahead of schedule, because she was always ahead of schedule, because she had always believed the work spoke for itself. She thought about the work speaking for itself. She thought about who had been listening. She thought about what Damon had said, when you're ready to say it, you should say it. She thought, almost. She thought, not yet, but soon. And for the first time in a very long time, soon did not feel like a thing she was only telling herself. It felt like something that was actually coming, something that, when it arrived, was going to change the shape of everything. She did not dread it. She thought, it is time. And the afternoon continued, and the office continued. And outside the window, the city did what cities do, held everything together in its constant, indifferent noise. And inside the Carver Group on the 11th floor, In an office with good light and a half-open door, Maya Ellis sat at her desk and thought about what it would mean to finally, fully, take up the space she had always deserved. The thing about a decision that has been forming for a long time is that when it finally arrives, it does not feel like a decision. It feels like a fact, like something that was always going to be true and is simply now revealing itself, the way a word you have been trying to remember suddenly surfaces, complete and correct, without any sense of effort, just there, finally, the way it was always going to be. Maya did not decide to tell Damon the whole truth. She simply found herself doing it. It happened on a Thursday evening in the second week of July. She had been in the building late, later than most, though not later than Lena, whose light, Maya had noticed, was frequently still on when she left, and she had passed through the kitchen on the way to the elevator and found Damon there again, which was either coincidence or the kind of thing that stops being coincidence after the second or third occurrence. He was making tea, which surprised her. She had assumed he was a coffee person. "I didn't know you drank tea," she said. "Only in the evenings," he said. "Coffee after 4 makes it hard to sleep." She put her bag down on the counter, a gesture that, she realized after she made it, signaled that she was not planning to leave immediately. He noticed this too. He did not comment on it. "How was your day?" he asked. It was such a simple question. The kind of question that most people answer with a single word and mean nothing by. She found herself answering it honestly. "Hard," she said. Not in a dramatic way, just the particular kind of hard, where you understand something more clearly than you did before, and the clarity is not comfortable. He looked at her over his tea. "What did you understand?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been making myself small for a long time. I've been doing it so well, and for so long, that I stopped noticing I was doing it. And the problem with that is that when you're very good at something, including the act of making yourself small, the people around you start to take it as a feature of the environment. They stop seeing it as a choice. They just see it as the way things are." He was listening. Not in the polite, performative way people sometimes listen, with the particular quality of a person waiting for their turn to speak, but actually listening, attending to what she was saying with his full attention. She continued. "What I did with Lena, giving her the space, preparing her, stepping back. I made that choice because I thought it was right. I still think it was right, in the specific sense that I had good reasons for making it. But I think I also made it because stepping back is a thing I know how to do. I've had a lot of practice, and sometimes what you know how to do is not the same as what you should do." "What should you have done?" he asked. "I should have asked for something in return," she said. "Not formally, not as a transaction. But I should have been clear about what I was giving and what it meant, and I should have named it at the time, instead of trusting that it would be understood. Because when you don't name things, people fill the silence with whatever story is most convenient for them." She stopped herself. She had not intended to say that much. The words had simply come out, carried by the particular quality of the evening, and the kitchen, and the fact that he was someone who listened without trying to solve her. He set his tea down. "Can I tell you what I've observed?" he said. "Yes. I've watched you in this building for 3 years. I've watched you run accounts, manage teams, navigate about 17 different kinds of complicated situations. And I've watched you do all of it, with more competence and less fuss than anyone else I've worked alongside." He paused. "I've also watched people take credit for things you built. I've watched the institutional memory of this place get slowly rewritten, in a way that centers Lena's presence, and makes everything before her arrival look like a warm-up act. And I've watched you let it happen, and I've been trying to understand why." She looked at him. "I think I understand now," he said. "You let it happen because you decided, at some point, that having done the right thing was more important than having done it be known. And I respect that. I genuinely respect it. But I also think that in trying to be better than the situation, you gave it permission to be worse." She sat with this. "Lena is not a villain," she said finally. "No," he agreed. "She's ambitious, and she was handed something I built, and she accepted it, without looking too hard at the history. And she's been doing her best to fill the space without fully crediting the person who cleared it. That's a failure. But it's a human failure. People do that." "They do," he said. "And the fact that it's human doesn't make it okay." "No," she said. "It doesn't. There was a quiet between them. Not uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that forms between two people who are saying real things and are not in a hurry. "Do you know what the hardest part is?" she said. "Tell me." "The hardest part is that I'm not even angry at Lena. I thought I would be, at some point. I thought the anger would arrive eventually, as it usually does when you have been treated unfairly. But what I feel instead is something more like tiredness. Like I have been carrying something for a long time, and the weight of it is less about what Lena did, and more about what I allowed, what I kept accepting as the cost of being the kind of person I wanted to be. And what kind of person is that?" She looked at him directly. The kind who doesn't make things worse by fighting over them. The kind who can absorb something difficult without becoming difficult in response. The kind who believes that doing good work is enough. "And is it?" he asked, quietly, without judgment. She held his gaze. "No," she said. "Not by itself. Not in this world. Doing good work is necessary. It is not sufficient." He nodded, slowly. "I think you've known that for a while," he said. "I think I've been knowing it slowly," she said. I think this conversation has finished the process." Outside, it was dark. The kitchen was lit by the ordinary fluorescent light of an office after hours. Not flattering, not atmospheric, just functional. Somewhere outside the building, a car horn sounded and was absorbed by the general city noise. Inside, in the kitchen of the 8th floor, two people stood across from each other and had a conversation that was honest, in a way that honest conversations rarely are, not as a performance of honesty, but as the simple act of saying what was true, without managing it first. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I think I'm done letting this continue, as if it's fine. It's not fine. What happened was not entirely right, and I think there are people in this building who deserve to know that. Not as gossip, not as drama, but as a matter of accuracy." "Who do you want to tell?" She looked at him. "I've been telling you," she said, "for the past week and a half, in various forms, and you've been listening." He held her gaze. "I have. So I've started," she said. "And I think the next step is to decide what to do with what I've said." "And what do you want to do with it?" She was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that is not absence but the presence of something forming. "I think I want to decide what this place is," she said finally. "Whether it's somewhere I can still grow, or whether I've been staying out of loyalty to something that no longer exists in the form I was loyal to." She paused. "And I think the answer to that question is going to determine everything else." He was looking at her with the particular quality of attention she had noticed from the beginning. Full and clear, and without agenda. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I want you to know that what you told me tonight matters. Not just to me professionally. What I mean is, it matters that you said it. You deserve to say it. And I'm glad it was me you said it to." She looked at him for a moment. She did not look away. "So am I," she said. It was a simple thing to say. It was a complete thing. She picked up her bag from the counter. She said goodnight in the ordinary way of someone ending an ordinary evening conversation. He said goodnight back. She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button. The doors opened. She stepped inside, and riding down through the building in the silence of the elevator, she thought about what she had said and what it meant. She thought about the word that had been moving toward her for weeks, taking its shape in the dark. Enough. She had been enough for a long time, more than enough, and she had been keeping herself carefully below that, performing a lesser version of what she was, because the full version seemed to cost other people something they were not willing to pay. She was done doing that. She did not know the exact form that being done would take. She did not know who would be affected or how, or what would change and what would remain. She was not a person who made decisions in the absence of thinking them through. But she knew, riding down in the elevator in the quiet building on a Thursday evening in July, that she had crossed something, some internal line that she had been approaching for months without quite reaching. She had reached it now. She had said the true things out loud, to someone who deserved to hear them, and she was not going to unsay them. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto the lobby, bright and empty, the marble floor reflecting the overhead lights in long yellow lines. She walked across it and out into the evening air. The city received her as cities do, without ceremony, without acknowledgement, just as part of its constant ongoing everything. She walked. The air was warm. The night was clear. And somewhere behind her, in the lit building she had just left, Damon Cole stood in the kitchen with his cooling tea and thought about what had just happened and felt, in the chest and in the specific place where things that matter register in the body, that something had shifted that was not going back. He was right about that. It was not going back. What came next would not be a resolution or a conclusion or any kind of tidy ending. What came next would be harder and more honest and more real than anything that had preceded it. But it would be true. And for two people who had been working in the same building for 3 years, each in their own specific way committed to honesty above convenience, that was the right place to begin. There is a kind of reckoning that does not announce itself with a scene. It does not arrive with a confrontation, or a revelation, or a moment of clear dramatic turning. It arrives instead with a quality of ordinary morning light, the same light that falls on every other morning. But something in how you stand in it is different, and that difference is enough to change the whole day. Maya woke on Friday knowing that she was going to say something. She did not know yet exactly what, or to whom, or when. But the knowledge that she was going to speak, that she had already, in a real sense, begun, sat in her chest with a new and serious weight that was not heavy in a bad way. It was the weight of something that was supposed to be there. She made coffee. She stood at her kitchen window and watched the street below coming to life in the early morning way of streets that have been doing this longer than any of the people currently on them. A woman with a small dog, a man in a gray jacket reading something on his phone, 2 children being hurried along by a parent who was carrying too many things and managing all of them with the practiced competence of someone who does this every day. She thought about competence. She thought about the particular way competence becomes invisible when it is consistent. You stop seeing the thing that is always there. You begin to see the gaps where it is absent, and you mistake those gaps for the definition of the thing itself. She had made the Carver Group competent at its work for 15 years. She had not been absent once, and because she had never been absent, the work had simply happened, consistently, reliably, excellently, in a way that made it difficult to point to and say, this was a person, this was her, this is what we had and what it cost. She finished her coffee. She got dressed. She was in the office by 8:15, which was her usual time, and she went through the morning with her usual efficiency. Emails, a quick check-in with her team, a review of the work in progress on 3 active accounts. She was thorough. She was precise. She said good morning to the people she passed and meant it. At 10 o'clock she received a message from Neil Hartley's assistant, asking if she was free for a brief conversation at 11. She said yes. She spent the intervening hour finishing what she was working on, saving her files with the particular care she always brought to this, the kind of careful saving that is not superstition, but precision, the act of making sure the work is protected regardless of what else happens. Neil's office had a glass wall facing the rest of the floor, which meant that most conversations within it were visible to anyone in the corridor, even if not audible. This had always seemed, to Maya, like an accidental design choice that actually expressed something truthful about how Neil worked, the performance of transparency without the substance of it. You could see the meeting but not hear it. You saw people talking. You could not tell what was actually being said. She went in at 11. Neil was behind his desk. He gestured to the chair across from him, which she took. He looked, as he often did, mildly pressured in the way that people who are managing more than they can hold look, not in crisis, just perpetually on the edge of one. "Thanks for coming in," he said. "Of course," she said. "I wanted to touch base about your role going forward," he said. He said it in the tone of a person who has rehearsed the opening and is now slightly uncertain about what comes after. The restructure has been in place for a few months now, and we want to make sure that everyone is settled, that you feel clear about where things stand. She looked at him steadily. "I feel very clear about where things stand," she said. Something flickered in his expression. "Good," he said. "That's good. We value your contribution enormously. You know that. And we want to make sure the structure going forward reflects that in a way that's meaningful." "What does that mean?" she asked, not unkindly, just directly. He shifted slightly. "We're thinking about a senior advisory role, something that puts you in a more strategic position across accounts, less day-to-day management. More visibility at the senior level. She absorbed this. Senior advisory was the particular vocabulary of organizations that want to honor someone without giving them power. It was the role you created for a person you wanted to keep quiet and on side. It was, in the clearest possible terms, a smaller box offered in a larger wrapping. "I'd like to think about it," she said. He looked relieved by this, as if the conversation, for him, had ended. He had made the offer. She had not refused it immediately. This constituted, in his accounting, a successful exchange. "Absolutely," he said. "Take your time." She stood. She thanked him for his time. She left. She walked back to her office, and she sat down, and she thought, no. Not with anger. Not with drama. Just, no. No. This was not what she was going to do. She was not going to accept a quieter box and perform gratitude for it. She was not going to spend the next chapter of her career in a role that had been designed specifically to contain her, rather than use her. She thought about Damon, about what he had said. When you're ready to say it, you should say it. She thought, I'm ready. She picked up her phone. She sent Damon a message that said, "Can we meet this afternoon? I'd like to talk." He replied within minutes. 4 o'clock. I'll book the small meeting room on 9. She set her phone down. She spent the rest of the morning working. She answered emails. She gave detailed and useful feedback on a campaign deck from her team. She prepared notes for a client call at 2. She did all of this with complete attention, because she had learned a long time ago that the way you do things in ordinary moments is the most accurate reflection of who you are, and she was not a person who stopped doing things well simply because other things were also happening. At 2 she had the client call, which went well. At 3:30 she closed her laptop and gathered the thoughts she had been organizing since the morning. At 4 she walked to the 9th floor. Damon was already there when she arrived, sitting on one side of the small round table that the room held, 2 glasses of water already poured. He looked up when she walked in. She sat across from him. She said, "Neil offered me a senior advisory role." He waited. "It's a smaller role," she said, "dressed up, the kind of thing you offer someone when you want to keep them without actually keeping them." And I'm not going to take it," she said. "But before I decide what I'm going to do instead, I want to say something that I should have said a long time ago, and I want to say it to you first, clearly, and without performance, so that it exists somewhere, with someone who will understand what it means." He looked at her with the clear, full attention she had come to understand was simply how he engaged with things that mattered to him. "What I did when Lena arrived," she said, "was a choice I made for real reasons. I believed, genuinely, that stepping back and preparing her was the right thing to do. I believed she had potential. I believed that making room for someone is a kind of leadership that doesn't get enough credit. I still believe all of those things." He nodded. "But I also made a mistake," she said. "Not in the choice itself. In the silence around it, I chose to step back, and I told nobody what that meant. I didn't say, I am giving something real. I didn't say, here is what this costs me. I just did it, and I trusted that the doing of it would speak. And it didn't speak. It got absorbed. It got claimed. It became part of a story that doesn't include me, or includes me only as background." She paused. "I am tired of being background," she said. There was a quality to the silence after she said it. Not absence, but presence. The weight of something true that has finally been said in the right room. He looked at her and said, "You were never background. You were always the center of it. People just stopped being honest about that." "Yes," she said, "and I let them. What are you going to do?" She sat back slightly. She had been thinking about this since the morning. She had turned it over with the thoroughness she brought to everything, and she had arrived at an answer that was clean and honest and, she thought, exactly right. "I'm going to leave," she said. He was still. "Not dramatically," she said. "Not in anger. I'm going to do it properly. Notice period. Full handover. Everything done the way it should be done. I'm not going to burn anything. That is not who I am." "And after?" "After, I'm going to build something of my own," she said. "I've been managing other people's visions for 15 years. I know the work. I know the business. I know the clients. And I think I'm done being the person who makes someone else's house excellent and then watches them renovate it without asking me." He looked at her for a long moment. "I think that's right," he said. "I think it's completely right." "I'm not asking for your permission," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm telling you it's right, because it is." "You're not asking for permission. You're telling me something true." She looked at him. "And I want to tell you something else," she said. Her voice was steady. "About you. About what these conversations have meant." He waited. "You saw something that nobody else in this building was willing to see clearly," she said. "You said things that were honest, when it would have been easier to say nothing. And that has mattered to me. Not just professionally. I want to be clear about that." He held her gaze. "It has mattered to me too," he said. "I want to be equally clear." She nodded. "But I need to do this next thing first," she said. "I need to do it for myself, and by myself. You understand that?" "I understand it," he said. "And when it's done, when I've left and started what comes next, I'd like to have a conversation about what this has been. What we—" She paused, choosing the word carefully. "What we've been building, the past few weeks, in these conversations." He looked at her steadily. Something in his expression that was not quite a smile but was the feeling of one, warm and real, and held with the discipline of a person who takes things seriously, rather than casually. "I'll be here for that conversation," he said. "Good," she said. She stood. She picked up her things. "Thank you for the water," she said. He almost laughed. She could see it at the edge of his expression. She walked to the door. She stopped at the threshold and turned. "One more thing," she said. He looked up. "When I'm gone," she said, "and people figure out what has actually happened here, what was given and what was taken, and how the story was written, I'd appreciate it if you told it accurately." "You have my word," he said. She held his gaze for one more moment. Then she walked out. She went back to her office. She sat down. She opened a document and began to write her resignation letter, not with grief and not with excitement, but with the particular quality of clarity that comes from finally doing the thing that was always going to be right. She wrote it carefully. She wrote it with respect. She wrote it in the voice of someone who is leaving, not because she is defeated, but because she has decided that what is ahead is worth more than what is being left. She finished it in 20 minutes. She read it once. Then she saved it. She was not going to send it today. There were things she needed to do first, conversations she needed to have, arrangements she needed to make. But it existed now. It was real. The decision had moved from inside her, where it had been forming for months, to outside her, where it was a document with her name on it. That evening she walked home in the long July light, the kind of evening where the city feels almost companionable, where the people on the street are moving in a way that is slightly less hurried than usual, as if the warmth of the air has adjusted the general pace of things. She was not afraid. She had expected to be afraid. She was leaving a company she had given 15 years to. She was stepping into something that did not yet fully exist. She was choosing, after a long, careful life of not rocking things, to rock something. She was not afraid. She felt, walking in the warm evening, something that she recognized after a moment as lightness, the particular kind of lightness that arrives when you have been carrying something for a long time and you have finally set it down. She had not set it down in anger. She had set it down with open eyes and a clear understanding of what she was doing and why. That, she thought, was the right way to end a chapter. She did not know yet how the next one would begin. She did not know what the company she built would look like, or how long it would take, or who would come with her, if anyone. She did not know what she and Damon were, exactly, or what they would become, once the space between them opened up in the way she had promised herself it would. She knew very little about what came next, but she was going toward it anyway. And she was going toward it as herself, without management, without the careful performance of smallness she had mastered over 15 years. As herself. As exactly who she was. Which was, it turned out, more than enough. The morning she told Lena, it was raining. Not the aggressive kind of rain that arrives in July and surprises everyone, just a soft, persistent gray rain that had settled over the city overnight and showed no sign of leaving, the kind that makes everything look a little more honest than it usually does, the colors deeper, and the edges clearer. Maya had sent an email to Lena the evening before, asking for 15 minutes the next morning. She had not said what it was about. Lena had responded within the hour saying, of course, 10:30 works. She arrived at Lena's office precisely at 10:30. Lena was ready for her, seated, composed, dressed in a way that communicated authority without effort. She had a quality, Maya had always thought, of performing competence so naturally that you had to look carefully to determine where the performance ended and the real thing began. Over the months, Maya had spent some time looking carefully, and what she had concluded was, the real thing was there. It was just shaped by a layer of presentation that Lena had cultivated specifically because the real thing, by itself, did not feel like enough to her. Maya understood this. She had never disliked Lena for it. You cannot always choose your doubts. Come in, Lena said, warmly. What's going on? Maya sat down. She put her folder on her lap. She looked at Lena directly. I've decided to leave the company, she said. The silence that followed was clean and immediate. Lena's expression did something complex, surprise, and then something underneath the surprise that was harder to read, something that moved quickly across her face before being managed. Leave, Lena said. Not a question exactly, a repetition, a way of making the word real by saying it. Yes, Maya said. I've written my resignation letter. I'll be giving it to Neil formally today. I wanted to tell you first. Why? Lena asked. It was an honest question. Maya appreciated that. Because you and I have been in a particular situation for the past several months, Maya said, and I think you deserve to hear from me directly, rather than through the company grapevine, or from Neil, or however these things get communicated. Lena was quiet. She was holding herself with the stillness of a person who is processing something that they did not see coming, and is trying to determine whether they are supposed to see it coming. Is this because of the role? She asked. What happened with the creative director position? Maya looked at her. Partly, she said. Another silence. Maya, Lena started. I'm not here to have a difficult conversation, Maya said before she could continue. I'm not here to say things that will make you feel bad. I'm genuinely not interested in that. But I think there are a few things that I want to say clearly, as one professional to another, and I'd like you to hear them. Lena nodded. Her expression had shifted from composed to something more careful. I stepped back from this role because I believed it was the right thing, Maya said. I prepared you because I wanted you to succeed. Those decisions were mine, and I made them consciously. I'm not asking for an apology for the situation. She paused. What I am saying is that over the past several months, things have been attributed and described in ways that don't fully reflect what happened. The work I built has been presented without reference to who built it. The history of this department has been told in a way that starts 8 months ago, and I know that is partly how organizations work. The new person tells the story from where they stand, and the story before them gets smoothed over. I understand that. But understanding something and being entirely comfortable with it are different. Lena was very still. I'm leaving because I've decided to build something of my own, Maya continued. Not because I was pushed out. Not because I'm defeated. I'm leaving because I've realized that what I'm capable of doesn't fit neatly into the role I currently have, and that the role I was going to be offered, the advisory one, was not designed with my capabilities in mind. It was designed with the company's comfort in mind. She stopped. She looked at Lena. I want you to do well, she said. I genuinely mean that. You have real ability. You have more than I think you've given yourself credit for, which is why you sometimes reach for presentation when the real thing would be more than enough. She said this without judgment. I hope that becomes clearer to you over time. Lena held her gaze. There was a long silence. When Lena spoke, her voice was quieter than usual. Did you tell Damon? Maya considered the question. I've talked to Damon, she said carefully. Oh. Lena nodded slowly. She looked at the surface of her desk for a moment. You know he respects you enormously, Lena said. It was not quite a question, and not quite a statement. It was something in between, an acknowledgement that carried within it a more complicated understanding. I know, Maya said. Lena looked up at her. I want to say something, she said, and I want to say it honestly. Please do, Maya said. I knew, Lena said. What you gave up, I knew from the beginning. I knew that you were next in line, and that the position shifted because of me, because of who I am in relation to this company. I knew it was not entirely fair. Maya listened. And I accepted it anyway, Lena said. I told myself it was an opportunity, and that I would earn it, which I have been trying to do. But I didn't. I didn't acknowledge what it came from. And I think part of me didn't because acknowledging it out loud would have made it harder to feel entirely good about it. She stopped. She looked at Maya with something in her expression that was not polished or managed. I should have said something to you, she said, a long time ago. I should have said, I know what you did. I know what it cost. I'm not going to pretend that what I have is entirely mine. The rain continued outside, soft and gray and honest. Maya looked at her for a long moment. Thank you for saying that, she said. And she meant it. Not as a resolution to everything, not as an erasure of what had happened, but as the accurate and real thing that it was. A true thing, said at last. Too late to change the course, but not too late to matter. She stood. I hope things go well for you, she said. Lena stood too. For a moment, she looked like she was going to say something more. Then she simply said, I hope the same for you. I mean it. Maya nodded. She walked to the door. She stepped out into the hallway, which was quiet. Most people were in meetings or at their desks, the normal morning activity of an ordinary Thursday having continued completely unaware of what had just taken place in the corner office. She walked down the hall to Neil's office. She knocked. She went in. She handed him the letter. He read it in silence. His expression cycled through several things: surprise, calculation, something that might have been relief, and that she chose not to analyze too carefully. Maya, he said. I hope this isn't. It isn't anything dramatic, she said. It's a decision I've made thoughtfully, and I'm comfortable with it. I've given a full notice period. I'll do a complete handover of everything I'm managing. It will be handled well. He looked at her for a moment. I'm sorry things got to this point, he said. She looked at him. She thought about several things she could say. She chose the simplest one. I think some things got to this point a while ago, she said. But I'm leaving well, and I think that's what matters. He nodded. She left. She walked back to her office, the office with the good light and the half-open door, and she sat down. She looked around the space, the ordered desk, the clean shelves, the window through which she had watched 3 years of weather pass, while sitting in exactly this chair. She felt something in her chest, not grief, not yet, but the particular awareness of an ending that is close enough to feel real. She would sit in this chair for another month, and then she would not. She would walk through these doors every morning for another month, and then she would not. She had built something real in this place, and she was leaving it. Not because it had failed her entirely, but because she had learned, over these last difficult months, that she was something larger than what this place had been willing to let her be. She opened her laptop. She began to work. She spent the rest of the day doing what she always did, working carefully and well. She answered every email. She reviewed every brief with attention. She had a conversation with her team that was warm and professional and did not yet reveal what was coming, because the right moment for that was not today. At 5 o'clock, she closed her laptop. She said good evening to the people she passed on the way to the elevator. She rode down. She walked out into the rain. It was still soft, still gray, still the particular kind of rain that makes the city look honest. She walked in it without hurrying, and she thought about what she had done, all of it, the whole sequence of choices and conversations and decisions, and she thought, this is who I am, this is what I do with things. I think about them honestly, and I act from the best of myself, and I leave things in better condition than I found them, even when the leaving is hard. She was not a person who burned things. She was a person who built them, and she was going to build again. She did not know yet what it would look like. She did not know what she would call it, where she would put it, which clients would come with her. Some would, she was fairly certain. She did not know the exact shape of the future, but she knew who she was going into it as. And she knew that Damon would be in it somewhere, not as a complication, not as a distraction, but as something real that had been building between two honest people who had seen each other clearly, in a place that was not always willing to see things clearly. She would call him this weekend. They would have the conversation she had promised they would have. She was looking forward to it. But first, the rain, and the evening, and the particular satisfaction of a person who has done a hard thing honestly, and is walking toward what comes next. She walked. The city received her. And the evening continued in its ordinary way, holding within it, as evenings always do, all the endings and beginnings that are simply, quietly, underway. Damon received the resignation news the way he received most significant pieces of information, without visible reaction, and with immediate, careful attention. Neil told him at 2 p.m. on the same Thursday, Maya had submitted the letter. He called Damon into his office, closed the door, and delivered the news with the kind of gravity that people use when they have decided something is a crisis, before they have determined whether it actually is. Maya has resigned, Neil said, effective in 30 days. Damon held his face still. He was good at this, not from coldness but from the discipline of someone who has learned that immediate reactions in professional settings almost always need revision, and it is more efficient to wait until you understand the full shape of a thing before you respond to it. I see, he said. We're in a difficult position, Neil said. She manages 3 major accounts. The transition is going to need to be careful. She'll do a full handover, Damon said. That's who she is. You don't need to worry about that part. Neil looked at him. You seem to know her quite well. I've worked in the same company as her for 3 years, Damon said, and I pay attention. Neil absorbed this without fully understanding it. He moved on to practical questions. Who would cover which accounts? Whether Lena would take on additional scope? Whether they should begin a hiring process? Damon answered each question with the precision he brought to operational problems. He did not say, I knew this was coming. He did not say, this is the result of choices this company made and had the opportunity to make differently. He answered the practical questions, and he left when the meeting was over, and he went back to his own office, and he sat down and thought about Maya. He thought about her with the particular quality of thought he had been applying to her for several months, not with casualness, not as a professional puzzle, but with the attention of a person who has recognized something in another person that he had not expected to recognize, and that had been sitting in him, growing in specificity, since the first time he had said something honest to her in a kitchen, and watched her receive it without flinching. He thought about the conversation they had in the 9th floor meeting room, about the things she had said, about the moment when she had told him, in the most careful and direct way he had heard anyone say something like this, I want to have a conversation with you about what this has been. He had been thinking about that ever since. He was not a person who acted quickly on things that mattered. He was not, in his personal life, the kind of man who moved fast. He thought that people who moved fast on important things were frequently mistaking urgency for significance, and that the things that were real were better served by patience. He had moved slowly through most of his life, not from hesitation but from preference, from the understanding that what you build carefully tends to hold. But he had also been thinking, in the past weeks, about the particular cost of patience, the way that being careful can look, from the outside, like being absent, the way that a person who is slow to speak can be mistaken for a person who has nothing to say. He did not want to be mistaken for having nothing to say, not by her. He picked up his phone. He sent her a message. I heard. Can we meet this evening? She replied within a few minutes. Yes. Not the office, though. The coffee place on Dern Street. 7. He replied. See you there. He spent the rest of the afternoon on the operations problem of Maya's departure. A problem that was also, in a different register, simply her departure, her absence from the building, the end of the particular quality of her being here that he had not known he would miss, until the missing of it had arrived before the actual absence and announced itself clearly. He was going to miss her in the building. He was aware of this. He did not try to avoid the awareness of it. At 6:30 he left the office and walked to Dern Street, which was a 15-minute walk from the Carver Group, and which took him through a part of the city he knew well, a neighborhood that had been changing slowly for several years, the old things and the new things existing side by side, in the particular texture of a city that does not fully decide what it wants to be. He arrived before her. He chose a table near the window, ordered a coffee, and sat. She arrived at 7, or very close to it, wearing the jacket she often wore, and carrying the kind of quietness she carried on evenings when she had done something significant during the day and was living in its aftermath. She saw him. She sat down. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. The word was simple. It was also complete in a way that words in professional settings almost never are. It was just two people saying hello, without the architecture of context around it. She ordered tea. He had already ordered. They sat for a moment. "How was the rest of the day?" he asked. "Long," she said, "but clear." "Lena?" "I spoke to her this morning, before Neil." He raised his eyebrows slightly. "How was that?" "Better than I expected," she said. "She said something honest, more honest than I thought she would." He nodded. "Neil was Neil," she added. He almost smiled at that. They both knew what it meant. The coffee arrived, the rain had stopped, and the evening outside the window was moving toward dusk, the particular light of a July evening after rain, clean and low and specific. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Ask," she said. "How do you feel?" It was the second time someone had asked her a simple, direct question that deserved a real answer, and she found that, as she had with Damon before, she wanted to give one. "I feel lighter," she said. "I feel like I've put down something I've been holding for a long time. I feel clear." "And nervous?" "Of course nervous," she said. "I'm leaving a stable job to start something I have not started yet. Nervous is appropriate. But not afraid." She considered this. No, not afraid. He looked at her for a long moment. "You told me," he said, "when we talked last time, in the meeting room, that you wanted to have a conversation about what this has been, between us." She met his eyes. "I remember. I've been thinking about that since you said it." "And?" He set his coffee cup down. He held her gaze with the directness that was simply who he was. Not performance, not pressure, just the quality of a person who looks at things honestly. "I think you know what I'm going to say," he said. "I think I do," she said. "But say it." "I've been paying attention to you for 3 years," he said. "In the way that you pay attention to something, because it's excellent at what it does. And then in the past several months, in a different way, in the way that you pay attention to someone, because they are someone you want to understand better, because something in them is recognizable to something in you." She was quiet, listening. "And through these conversations, the kitchen, the meeting room, all of it, I've understood something very clearly," he said. "I think you are one of the most real people I have encountered in a long time. Not in a sentimental way. In the specific sense that what you say and what you feel are the same thing. That you don't perform, that you think carefully, and then you act from that thought, and you hold yourself accountable for the gap between what you intend and what you do." He paused. "And I find that extraordinary," he said. "I'm not in the habit of saying things like this because I'm not a person who speaks before I'm sure, but I'm sure about this." She looked at him. "I think I've been sure for longer than is polite to admit," she said. He held her gaze. Something in his expression settled, not relief exactly, but the quality of something that has been held carefully, finally being able to rest. "I want to say something clearly," she said. "Say it." "I'm not going to make any decisions about this right now," she said. "I have a transition to manage. I have a company to start. I am in the middle of one of the largest changes of my professional life, and I know myself well enough to know that I do not make good personal decisions in the middle of large professional changes." He nodded. "That's fair." "But I also want to be honest," she said, "which is that these conversations have mattered, that you have mattered, and that I am not walking away from what's between us. I am simply being careful about when and how I step into it." "I can work with careful," he said. "Careful is how I do everything." She looked at him, and something in her expression shifted, the smallest relaxation of the particular management she kept, a brief opening of something that was not usually open in professional spaces. "I know," she said. They sat with that for a moment. Outside, the light continued its slow move toward evening. People moved past the window, the ordinary evening movement of people going toward something or away from something in the comfortable way of a Thursday in July. "There's something else I want to say," she said. "Go ahead. When I'm gone, when the transition is done, and I'm on the other side of this, I think you should know that what you did matters. Not just the conversations. The fact that you looked clearly at something that people were choosing not to look at, that has a value that's hard to put into words. You already said something like that, he said. I know. I'm saying it again because I want it to be clear. He held her gaze. It's clear, he said, and then quietly. You mattered. What happened to you mattered. What you built mattered. She did not say anything for a moment. Then, thank you. It was simple. It was everything. They sat there in the coffee shop on Dern Street as the evening arrived fully around them. Two people who had said honest things to each other, in rooms where honesty was not always the default, and who were now sitting with the particular lightness of that, the way honesty, once said, takes something with it, and leaves something cleaner in its place. She finished her tea. He finished his coffee. I should go, she said. Early morning tomorrow. Of course, he said. They stood. They walked out together, which felt natural, onto the street where the air was cool and washed from the rain. They stood for a moment. I'll see you in the building, she said, for the next 30 days. You will, he said. And after that? She paused. And after that, he said. Yes. She nodded. She started to walk. She did not look back this time, not because she had nothing to look back at, but because looking forward had become, in the space of one day, the more compelling direction. He watched her go. He stood on the street in the evening air, and he thought about what she had built, and what she was going to build, and who she was, the particular, rare quality of who she was, and he felt something that had been quietly forming in him for months settle into something complete. He walked home by a long route. The city was doing what it always did, holding everything together in its constant motion, and he walked through it and thought about her, and about the truth, and about all the things that had been said, and all the things that were still ahead. The 30 days passed the way transitions always do, in motion, mostly, with enough activity to prevent too much looking backward, and enough structure to make each day purposeful. Maya managed them exactly as she had promised. She was thorough. She documented everything. She met with every client and introduced the person who would be taking over each account with the particular grace of someone who understands that a handover is not just a transfer of information, but a transfer of trust, and that trust cannot be rushed. She gave each of her team members individual time, honest conversations about their development, their ambitions, the things she had observed about each of them that she thought would serve them well if they paid attention to them. She prepared notes on every account, every campaign, every ongoing relationship that were detailed enough to function without her, and honest enough to flag the things that would require careful handling. She did this without being asked to do it to that level of detail. She did it because it was the right way to leave. Lena was visible through this period, and careful. She did not seek Maya out more than necessary, but when their paths crossed, she was respectful, in a way that was different from her earlier courtesy. Something in the exchange in the corner office had shifted the register of how she carried herself around Maya. There was less performance in it, and more something that sat closer to actual regard. They did not have another long conversation. They did not need to. Jeff Harrison called Maya directly, which she had not expected. He told her he was sorry to hear she was leaving, and asked if she was going to do something new, and when she said yes, she was starting her own firm. He said, "Good. Let me know when it's open." I'm not sure the Carver Group fully understood what it had. She thanked him warmly and said nothing beyond that, but she held the call in her memory as something to return to. Francis, from Meridian, sent an email that was 3 sentences long and completely unambiguous. I heard the news. I hope you know the value of what you've built. Don't let anyone diminish it, including yourself. Maya read that email twice and felt something that was not quite sadness, but was in the territory of it. The particular feeling of being seen clearly by someone, at the moment you are already leaving, and wishing the clarity had arrived sooner, while also understanding that timing rarely cooperates with desire. She replied, "Thank you for this. I will carry it." Through all of it, she saw Damon regularly. In the hallways, in meetings where their departments touched, twice more in the kitchen at different hours. Each time they spoke the way they had been speaking for the past month. Honestly, with warmth, without the careful scaffolding of professional performance. There was an ease between them now that was not carelessness, but the particular ease of two people who have decided to be real with each other and have found that being real is, in fact, easier than the alternative. He did not press her on anything personal. He did not push toward a conversation she had said she was not ready to have yet. He was exactly what he had said he was. Careful. And she found this, which she had known intellectually and now understood in practice, to be a quality she had not realized she valued as much as she did. Her last day arrived on a Tuesday. It was warm. The light through the windows was the full, rich light of late July, the kind of light that makes everything look slightly more significant than it otherwise would, which is either a feature or a coincidence of endings. She spent the morning doing the last few things that needed doing. She had a check-in with her team, a real one, not a performance, where she told them honestly that they were good at their work and that she hoped they would continue to do it with the same seriousness she had always asked of them. She told the two most junior members, specifically, that she expected to hear great things about them, because she had watched them develop and she could see what they were going to become if they kept going. They looked at her with the particular expression of young people who are receiving something they do not know yet how to hold and will need time to unpack. She understood. She had been that person once. At lunchtime, she walked outside and bought a sandwich from the small place on the corner that she had been going to since her first week at the company, 15 years ago. She ate it in the small park nearby, on a bench in the sun, watching the city move around her in its ordinary way. She thought about 15 years. She thought about what she had built, not just for the company, but for herself, the skills she had developed, the relationships she had formed, the understanding she had gained of how creative work is done, and what makes it matter, and what happens when you take it seriously, as a discipline, rather than a product. She thought about what she was carrying out of this place. Most of it was invisible. Most of what mattered, always was. She walked back. She spent the afternoon finishing the last of her documentation and clearing her desk. She was not a person who had accumulated much personal material in the space. A few books on the shelf, a plant she was taking home, a photograph from a company event 3 years ago that she had always liked, which she placed carefully in her bag. At 5 o'clock she gathered her things. She looked at the office, the good light, the half-open door, the clean desk, and she felt the ending of it simply and without drama. She had been here. She had done real work in this room. The room would continue without her, which was as it should be. The work she had done would continue to function, which was what she had always asked of it. She picked up her bag. She walked out. She said goodbye to the people she passed. Genuine goodbyes, not performances. Priya caught her at the elevator and held her without ceremony and said, into her shoulder, "You were the best of this place. I hope you know that." Maya held on for a moment. "Thank you," she said. She stepped back. Priya was managing her expression in the careful way she always managed things, professional and feeling at the same time, the particular combination that a lot of people try to avoid, because it is hard to hold both at once. "Take care of yourself," Maya said. "You too." The elevator arrived. She stepped inside. The doors closed. She was alone in the elevator for the time it took to descend 15 floors, and in that time she simply stood and breathed, and felt the specific quality of an ending that is also a beginning, the particular moment in between, where neither thing is fully true yet, and both things are entirely possible. The lobby received her. She walked across it, her footsteps making the small sounds they always made on the marble floor, and she pushed through the front doors and out into the full warmth of the July afternoon. Damon was there. He was not standing in an obvious way. He was leaning against the building facade with his phone in his hand, but he looked up when the door opened and he put the phone away. She stopped. She looked at him. "You waited," she said. "I said I'd be here for what came next," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression, for the first time in a very long time in a public space, did not manage itself. It was simply what it was, warm and real and clear. "I'm going to need a few weeks," she said, "to get the business properly started, to have a structure around what I'm building, before I build anything else." "I know," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded. She took a step past him. She was about to walk, had taken the first of the steps she was going to take, when she stopped and turned back. "For the record," she said, "I knew what you were, From the first time you said something honest in a kitchen." He looked at her with the expression that was not quite a smile, but was everything a smile contains. "For the record," he said. "So did I." She held his gaze for one more moment. Then she walked. She did not look back. The city received her, as it always did, as it always does, without ceremony, without acknowledgement, in its constant ordinary motion that holds all its stories without distinction. But she was different now. She was going somewhere. And the person she had always been, the person who had taken up less space than she deserved for 15 years, who had been background, who had built things quietly, and trusted that quiet buildings would eventually be seen, that person was still her. She had not left her behind. But she was walking forward now as the full version of her, the one who knew what she was worth, the one who had said true things to the right people, and had decided that her work was going to have her name on it, visibly and accurately, from this point forward. She was going to build something. It was going to be excellent, and it was going to be hers. In the weeks after Maya left, something happened at the Carver Group that was not a scandal, was not a crisis, did not announce itself in any dramatic way, but was, nonetheless, a fundamental shift in the quality of the air. It is difficult to explain precisely, because it was made of small things. It was the way certain clients asked, in the first meetings after the transition, questions that required answers nobody could fully give. Not hostile questions, just reasonable, specific questions about decisions that had been made and why. Questions whose answers had always lived in one person and now had nowhere to live. The answers could be approximated. They were not wrong, exactly. But they were not right in the way they had been when Maya was the one giving them, and people who knew the difference knew the difference. It was the way the creative briefing process, which had run with a particular efficiency for years, now required more iterations to reach results that were less precise. Nobody named this. Nobody said, "There is something missing." They simply said the briefs needed more work, and they worked more. It was the way Frances from Meridian sent an email in August, professional, measured, entirely reasonable in its language, indicating that she would be moving the creative account to a boutique firm, better suited to the account's current needs. The email did not say, "The boutique firm is Maya's." The email did not need to say that, because Neil knew it, and his assistant knew it, and the information moved through the office the way information in offices moves, which is quickly, and without precision. It was the way Jeff Harrison's next campaign, the rebrand, was attributed, in the industry trade press, to Ellis Creative, with specific mention of the strategic thinking that had shaped the new brand architecture. The article was 3 paragraphs long. It ran in one of the smaller trade publications. It was not a major feature, but it had Maya's name in the second sentence, and the name of the Carver Group was not in it at all. These things accumulated. They had no single meaning and no single effect, but together they created something, a change in the feeling of the place, a realization that was forming slowly and was not comfortable to form. Lena felt it most directly, because she was closest to it. In the weeks immediately following Maya's departure, she had moved through the transition with the competence that she genuinely possessed. She was organized, she was strategic, in the ways she knew how to be strategic, and she managed the day-to-day operation of the creative department with a seriousness that nobody questioned. She was, on any fair assessment, doing her job. But she was aware, increasingly, unavoidably aware, of the difference between doing a job and inhabiting it fully. She had always known, in some private part of herself, that what she was doing Maya's job. Not identically, she was not a copy of anyone, but building on a foundation that someone else had laid, in a space that had been shaped by someone else's years of thinking. She had managed this awareness for months by simply not looking at it directly. This is a thing that people do. They learn the shape of the uncomfortable truth, and they move through life along the edges of it, never quite touching the center of it. After Maya left, the center of it became harder to avoid. It was partly the clients. It was partly the way certain conversations in meetings now required her to construct answers rather than recall them. It was partly the specific and precise absence that Maya represented, not as a person who had been unkind to her, because Maya had never been unkind, but as the person whose presence had made everything around it slightly more possible than it was now. She thought about the conversation in the corner office the day Maya had come to tell her she was leaving. She thought about what Maya had said, clean, direct, without performance. She thought about her own admission. I knew what you gave up. I knew from the beginning. She had said it and meant it. What she had not anticipated was how much it would stay with her. Because saying it, getting it out of the internal space where she had been holding it for months, into the actual air between her and Maya, had done something. Had made it real in a different way. Had made her accountable to it in a way she had not been before. She was accountable to it now. And being accountable to it changed how she moved through each day. Not dramatically. Not with announcement. But she was more careful now about the language she used. More precise about attribution. When the Harrison account came up in conversation, as it sometimes did, as a reference point for a type of brand architecture, she said clearly, that was built under Maya's direction, and this is what made it work. She said this not because she was forced to, and not because anyone was checking, but because she had made a commitment to honesty, and she intended to keep it. She did not know if Maya ever heard about this. She thought perhaps not. She did it anyway. Damon observed all of this from his position in client services, which put him at the edges of the creative department's dynamics, without being inside them. He saw the subtle calibrations. He tracked the client movements. He understood what they meant. He had conversations with Neil on 2 occasions in August that were professional in their framing, but direct in their substance. He told Neil that the Meridian departure was a predictable consequence of a transition that had been managed without adequate acknowledgement of what the transition actually cost. He said this without judgment in his voice, only in his words, which was his characteristic method. Neil looked uncomfortable and said the transition had been managed as well as it could have been. Damon said, I think we could have managed it better. I think the lesson for the future is that when something of significant value leaves an organization, the way you handle the departure matters as much as anything you do afterward. Neil nodded in the way people nod when they have understood something they did not want to understand. Damon left it there. He did not advocate for Maya's position retroactively. He did not make the conversations about her directly. He simply, consistently, made the case for honesty and fair dealing in organizational transitions, which was a case that happened to have her situation as its clearest illustration, without needing to use her name. This, too, was a form of keeping his word. She had asked him to tell the story accurately. He was telling it as accurately as the circumstances allowed. On a Saturday morning in early September, he drove to the west side of the city for the first time, to the building where Ellis Creative had its office. He had not been before. She had told him about it, described it, sent him a photograph from the window, but he had not been. She met him at the door. She was wearing what she wore on the weekends when she worked, which was what she wore on the weekdays when she worked, because she was not a person who performed differently in different modes. She showed him the office. It was modest. It was clean. It had good light from the north-facing windows and a wall that she had begun to use as a thinking wall, covered in printed briefs and color samples and pages of notes connected by lines that made sense to her and that she had explained to him, once in a conversation that had lasted 2 hours. He stood in the middle of it and looked at it. It's exactly right, he said. She smiled, a real smile, the kind he had been privileged to see more of in the past weeks than he had expected. I think so, she said. They went to lunch at a place nearby that she had already made a regular habit of. He ordered something she recommended. She told him about the Harrison rebrand and where it stood, and he listened with the genuine interest of someone who cared about work that mattered. She told him about a third client who had reached out, not a former Carver Group client, but a new one. A small company that had found her through the Meridian work and wanted something similar. She was excited about it in the specific, grounded way she was excited about things, not with performance but with the quality of attention that real interest generates. He watched her tell him about it and thought, this is what she looks like when she is doing what she is supposed to be doing. It was different from how she had looked at the Carver Group, even at her best there. At the Carver Group there had always been, underneath the competence and the professionalism, a quality of compression, as if she was always doing slightly less than she was capable of, always operating within a container that was slightly too small. He had noticed it without having words for it. Now the compression was gone. She was simply all of herself, working at her full capacity, in a space that was entirely hers. He found it extraordinary. He told her so, later, when they were walking back toward the building after lunch. What? She said. You look completely different when you're doing this. he said. Not different in the surface sense, in some other sense. Like the right amount of everything. She looked at him. You're going to make me emotional, and I have a client call at 3, she said. He did not quite laugh, but came very close. I'll save the rest for later, he said. You'd better, she said. She went back up to her office. He walked back toward the main road to find a cab. He was thinking, walking, about what she had asked him to do. Tell it accurately. He had been doing that. He intended to keep doing it. And one day, when the time was right, he thought he might write it down. Not as a professional account, not as a corporate lesson, but as something simpler and more human. The story of a woman who gave something real and did not get the credit for it. And what happened when someone decided to look at that honestly. Not because it was exceptional, because it was common. And the common things, told truthfully, are the ones that matter most to the most people. He reached the main road. He raised his hand for a cab. He thought about her, up on the 4th floor with the north light and the thinking wall. He thought about dinner tonight, which they had planned for a small place she knew, where the food was good and the room was not too loud, and you could talk the way people talk when they actually have things to say to each other. He thought, this is what it looks like when things go right. Not without difficulty, not without cost, but right, the specific rightness of a thing that is honest and earned, and arrived at through the work of being genuinely who you are. The cab arrived. He got in. He went back to his own day, which was real and good, and continuing, as days do, in the ordinary motion of forward. Maya did not remember the exact moment she understood that she had made it. This is not because the moment was unmemorable. It is because making it did not arrive as a single moment. It arrived the way most real things arrive, as an accumulation, a gradual weight of evidence that something had become true without announcing itself. It arrived in November, when Ellis Creative signed its 5th client. She had been tracking the growth carefully, not obsessively, but with the disciplined attention she brought to everything. And when the 5th contract was signed, she sat at her desk for a moment after the call and thought, this is real. This is actually real. It arrived when she hired her first full-time employee, a young designer named Connor who had graduated 2 years earlier and had been working in a large agency where his thinking was getting used, and his name was not, which she recognized immediately, and which was part of why she made the offer. He came in on his first day with the nervous energy of someone who is starting something they know matters, and she told him, every piece of work that leaves this office will have accurate attribution. His name on his work, her name on her work, the truth on the record. He looked at her with an expression that was almost confused. He was so unused to someone saying it plainly that he did not know immediately how to receive it. She understood. She had been that person. She gave him time to understand. It arrived when Jeff Harrison told her, over a working lunch in October, that the rebrand was performing better than anything they had done with the Carver Group in the past 3 years. He said this not to wound anyone, just because it was true and he was a person who said true things. He said it was the thinking, the particular depth of the brand strategy, that had made the difference. She thanked him and meant it. And it arrived. This is perhaps the accumulation that felt most complete. In a specific and ordinary Tuesday afternoon, when she was sitting at her desk, working on a brief, a cup of tea at her elbow, the light coming through the north windows in the flat, honest way it always came in, and she looked up from her screen and looked at the room, her company, her work, and thought, I built this the right way, and it is mine. She did not call anyone. She did not share the moment. She simply held it for a few seconds, and then went back to work. Because the work was always the point. She had lunch with Priya that week. They met at a place equidistant between their 2 offices and sat for 2 hours over a long and real meal. Priya told her about the Carver Group, the things that had changed, the things that had not, the gradual readjustment of the company around the new shape of things. She's trying, Priya said, about Lena, and said it without judgment. She's actually trying, I think. She's gotten more careful about saying where things came from. Maya nodded. I'm glad, she said. And she was, not with enthusiasm, or with the particular relief of vindication, just with the quiet and genuine gladness of someone who wanted the truth to be told, and was hearing that it was being told. She knows what happened, Priya said. I think she's known the whole time, and I think she's still figuring out how to live honestly with it. I don't know. It's more honest than a lot of people manage. It is, Maya agreed. They talked about other things. About Priya's own work, her own ambitions, the project she was developing that she had not told anyone at the company about yet. Maya listened to all of it with genuine interest and gave feedback that was real, specific and useful, and honest, the only kind she knew how to give. When they parted on the street outside, Priya held her again, the same way she had on the last day, without ceremony, just fully. "I'm proud of you," Priya said. Maya held on for a moment. "Thank you for seeing it," she said. She walked back to Ellis Creative. She thought, walking, about the whole arc of it, the 15 years at the Carver Group, the decision to step back, the months of quiet erosion, the conversations with Damon that had changed something in her, the decision to leave and to speak and to build. She thought about all of it with the particular clarity that comes from being on the other side of something. She thought, I would not undo any of it. This surprised her slightly. She had expected, had half anticipated, in the months when things were hardest, that she would emerge from the experience with a clear inventory of things she wished she had done differently. And she did, in some specific ways. She wished she had named her contribution at the outset, clearly, and without apology. She wished she had asked for something in return, instead of trusting the unspoken to be understood. She wished she had said the true things sooner. But she could not regret the generosity. She could not regret having been the kind of person who stepped back, for reasons she believed in. She could not regret being who she was, the version of herself that gave things away, and trusted people, and paid the price of that trust when it was misplaced. Because being who she was had also led her here, to this office, to this company, to the work that was entirely hers, to the understanding of what she was capable of when there were no limits on it, and to Damon, who was, on a Tuesday evening in November, meeting her at the restaurant on the west side that had become one of their regular places, and who stood up when she arrived and said simply, "Hi," in the way that he always said it now, not as a greeting, but as a small, complete acknowledgement that she was here, and that this was good. "Hi," she said. They sat. The restaurant was warm. It was not fully dark yet outside, the November evening, doing the slow fade of late autumn, taking longer than summer, but arriving more fully. She told him about the fifth client. He looked at her with the kind of quiet pleasure that people feel when something they believed in comes true. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said. He held her gaze. "Good," he said. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. It was a small gesture. It was also, in the particular language of two people who are precise about things and do not make gestures without meaning them, significant. He turned his hand over. "I want to say something," he said. "Say it. I want to say that watching you do this, build this thing, do it honestly, do it on your own terms, has been one of the most clarifying experiences I've had in a long time." She looked at him. "Not because it told me something I didn't know," he said, "but because it confirmed something I had suspected, and that it's good to have confirmed." What did it confirm? That the right way to do things is the only way to do things. That what you build honestly holds. That the people who are patient and precise and true, they get somewhere that the other kind of people don't get to. Not faster, but more real. She held his gaze. "You're not just talking about the business," she said. "No," he said, "I'm not." She nodded. She was not going to make a speech about it. It did not need one. What was between them did not need narration. It had been honest from the beginning, built in conversations that were real, and it was continuing in the same way. She was happy. Not the loud kind of happy. Not the kind that requires announcement. The quiet, durable kind. The kind that fits in your chest without pressure, and that you recognize, in moments like this one, as the thing you were always trying to get to. She was here. She was exactly here. Outside the restaurant, the city continued in its constant motion. Cars and people and light and all the usual noise of a city in the evening, indifferent and beautiful and holding everything within it. And inside, at a table by the window, two people sat in the warm light of a Tuesday in November, and were simply, honestly, entirely present. Damon Cole, who had looked at something clearly, when it would have been easier to look away. And Maya Ellis, who had given something real, and walked away with her dignity whole, and built something better than what she left. She had never recovered from it. That was not how she would have described it. She would have said, she never went back. And she did not need to. Because forward, the direction she had chosen, the direction she had walked in without looking back, was, it turned out, the right direction. It had always been the right direction. She had just needed the space to walk in it. And now she had it. Now she had it entirely.